Welcome back to the Halloween Spooktacular. Today I'm going to be talking about 2005's Constantine, starring Keanu Reeves, Shia LaBeouf, Rachel Weisz, Jaimin Hansu, and Tilda Swinton doing her best cosplay of Wes Anderson. Constantine, I never saw back in the day. I was really scared back in the day because I thought it was going to be like the super scary, super duper creep the shit out of you type of movie. It wasn't until later on where I started to get more into like watching scary movies and horror movies. It wasn't until I met my friend that I do podcasts with where he's like, yeah, scary movies aren't that scary. And that was the first time I saw Scream. That was like 2017, 2018. And I saw Scream and I was like, huh, that wasn't very scary. So that kind of was my gateway into this genre. And Constantine, you would feel like it plays off as a stereotypical action movie or a stereotypical comic book movie. And what I got to give Constantine credit for is that it doesn't. It's not a typical 2000s comic book movie. It's not a typical superhero origin story. You do get Constantine's origin and how he operates in this world, but it's not at the beginning of the narrative. It's kind of towards the middle as things start to pick up in the movie. You learn more about John Constantine as a character, and you learn more about the world that he inhabits and how he's essentially damned to hell when he dies, and how can he break that pact, and what exactly is going on that is going to make him go to hell. It's great stuff in the middle of the movie because the beginning of the movie is trying to build up a certain mystery that honestly is kind of boring. I don't think this movie has the best pacing to it, and I'm not saying that it lacks action because it's not the biggest action filled comic book movie you will ever see. And that's fine. A movie doesn't have to have action to be great. It should rely on its stakes, its characters, the plots, what necessitates that action. Are the action scenes necessitated by the story? That's kind of how I view action scenes. I don't know if that's how you all view action scenes, but that's how I do. That's how I do. And of course, there's the way the story plays out. It's not really necessitated that there's going to be a bunch of action scenes, but it's not slow because of a lack of action sequences. It's just slow because it doesn't really feel like it's building to all that much. You learn the baseline of the mystery, and then for the first 50 minutes or so to hour, the plot's not really moving forward all that much. There's no expansion to that. You don't learn all that much about the lore. You just know that John Constantine is here. He's got this sidekick played by Shia LaBeouf, who, by the way, will not stop saying John in this movie. It's almost as annoying as like Leonardo DiCaprio saying Rose in Titanic every 5 seconds. That's Shia LaBeouf in this movie. Seriously, take a drink. However many times he or another character says John in this movie, I'm pretty sure you're either going to be annoyed or really drunk by the end. Other than Tilda Swinton's Wes Anderson cosplay character that she's playing, and she's the Archangel Gabriel, other than her, there's nothing really much. Like they talk about, or they show at the very beginning of the movie, the Spear of Destiny, which is like the Spear of Longinus, the spear that pierced Jesus Christ on the cross. You don't really do anything with that until halfway in or a little more than halfway in. And once you actually start to investigate and see what John Constantine is seeing on the other side. Great visuals, by the way, directed by Francis Lawrence, who did 4 out of the 5 Hunger Games movies. He's got a keen eye for the camera. He's got a lot of zoom ins in here. His visual style is great. Once all of that starts, the movie really takes off. And even then, it's not very action packed, but it's a lot more fun in that regard than the first half of the movie, which I think kind of begrudgingly trudges itself along. It's not the most engaging movie until you get to the hour mark. And even then, it kind of feels like, okay, like is there going to be big payoff? Not to complain about a lack of action scenes, because I said a little lack of action scenes doesn't necessarily make or break a movie, but could have used maybe 1 or 2 more. The CGI for the time's not too bad. I really like the scenes where John's fighting demons. The demons rise out of people's bodies and they're flying through the air, like this opening exorcism scene where he's performing an exorcism on a young girl and that demon comes out of the body. It actually doesn't look too bad. It holds up pretty well 20 years later. From a visual standpoint, Constantine is great. I love its themes. I love its biblical references, as a movie like this should have when you have characters like Lucifer, the Archangel Gabriel, when you're dealing with crossing over in from heaven and hell, what John is actually dealing with inside. He's got inner demons in him, and what actually traumatized him as a kid. The writing and the themes there are great. And Francis Lawrence does a great job at presenting those themes. I just wish that this movie had better pacing to it. It wasn't as slow, as the movie isn't trying to lead you on. It's trying to be this giant comic booky action movie, but I gotta give it credit. At a time where comic book movies were doing origin stories, and comic book movies kind of set the precedence for being very action packed, in an era where all of that started, this kind of broke the formula for that. It's not the prototypical superhero or comic book movie. Well ahead of its time, I think. I think nowadays we're getting more comic book movies that are trying to be different, and that's good. But sometimes I think we're getting some that are trying to be different for the sake of being different, and that's not necessarily great. I mean, obviously they're trying to break formula, they're trying to not be as action packed, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. I think it mostly works with Constantine because it breaks an early formula that a lot of comic book movies were trying to establish in that time period. So I got to give it a lot of credit for actually standing out and being quite different amongst the pack of what would lead to an overflow of comic book movies that started around this time. Like, you had Spider-Man, you had the Fantastic Four movies, you had Ghost Rider, things like that. Batman Begins. This could have easily followed the formula of Batman Begins, but it didn't. And it really did its own thing. Constantine, for me, is a solid enough movie, and I'm going to give it a B. It's not as fun as I think it wants to be, but it does get fun, and there's some great action towards the end, some great visual effects within the crossing over scenes. I think Constantine it got mixed reviews. I think it's a lot better than a lot of the critics say it is. It just needed better pacing in that first half. So if you have seen Constantine, let me know what you think of it in the comments below. I'll leave my link to my website in the description below as well. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. My name is Alex Madden, and I will see you at the movies somewhere. Oh yeah, and you can't go without this movie without Keanu saying, yeah.